Crank up the volume and get ready for real-world bird hunting by listening to the Wingmen podcast by Eastmans. Now your host, Todd Helms.
Hey guys, this episode of the Wingmen podcast is brought to you by High Mountain Seasonings. The folks down at High Mountain Seasonings in Riverton, Wyoming have had my business since before I started working at Eastmans and way before Wingmen was even an idea in my head. I've been making homemade jerky and sausage and you name it, snack and sticks with their kits for a really, really long time. Having the pleasure a couple years ago to go down and take a factory tour and film that and do a duck hunt with one of the guys from the company, Brian Tucker, was a pleasure. They have such a cool operation down there in Riverton, Wyoming, and to think that their product from little old Riverton spreads out all over the country and into Canada is mind-blowing. I know they do business internationally as well, but it's incredible to me. I can go in so many different places, from the local grocery store to any of the big box sporting goods stores, and find that product. I can go in, I can grab a box, I can take it home, and I can, within 48 hours or 72 hours, I can have some of the best goose jerky known to man. I can put that on a plate, and you wouldn't know it's goose. I mean, a lot of guys be like, wow, this is amazing venison jerky. And it's like, hey, thanks. Yeah, you're eating goose. Like, what? This is goose? Thank you, High Mountain Seasonings. It's not just jerky kits, though, that those guys do. They have a whole ton of products. So I would recommend that you go over to highmountainjerky.com and check out the full assortment of products that they've got down there in Riverton, Wyoming.
Perfect.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Wingmen podcast. My guest today is Greer Smith from 50 Ducks. If you guys haven't heard of 50 Ducks, it is a super cool website that I'm going to let Greer walk us through the whole thing because he's going to be able to explain it. And I do have some questions to run down through with you. But Greer, welcome to the Wingmen podcast, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to talk to a new, happy, joyous face. And we fought through some technical difficulties on my end to get this thing going, but we're in it now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, 50 Ducks got, I have to admit, I was not aware of it until our head of sales and marketing here at Eastmans sent me a link and he's like, dude, have you seen this? This is really cool. And I pulled it up and started digging and I'm like, wow. In a nutshell, you guys offer real-time tracking of ducks wearing the little backpack telemetry devices, not just ducks, but waterfowl in general.
Right.
Across North America and Central America. I was playing with it. I've been playing with it the last couple of weeks, and there's one bird in particular that I want to talk about, but I'm going to let you kind of tell that story.
Yeah, man.
Tell us the story on 50 Ducks, because I mean, like I said, I've done some digging, but I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
For sure. Well, I appreciate it. And the story of 50 Ducks is there are a lot of different ways it could go. But in a nutshell, what we're doing is we have partnered with some awesome nonprofits across North America. The Jack Miner guys, Jack Miner Migratory Sanctuary in Kingsville, Ontario. We've partnered with them, and we've partnered with a nonprofit out of Mexico called Tierra Davis. With both of these groups, under all the appropriate scientific permits, we are helping fund telemetry studies that they are doing for various reasons. We are then repurposing this data and putting it online as a tool to bring more attention to waterfowl and their needs. And our main hope is that we can get more children, school kids, interested in conservation and the outdoors. So we have a website, and we actually have an app launching later today, the 50 Ducks app, Android and iPhone, where you can log on and you can see the movement of 1,350 historically tagged GPS waterfowl. And that data is from Fish and Game, different state agencies, and all sorts of folks like that who, that data has now been released to the public. We kind of cleaned it up, put it online for the user. And then we have our live stream as well, which is these birds that we have banded up in Kingsville, Ontario with Jack Miner. And the reason you hadn't heard of us until now is we just started doing this 70 days ago. So
wow,
that is pretty cool.
Super cool, man. Yeah, I I didn't. I just went on the website real quick, on and off. Kind of when I first heard of it, I checked it out, and I didn't dig much. I was super busy.
Right.
And then these last couple days, I'm kind of scratching my head, going, "Where are all of our birds right now?" You were out here in Wyoming a couple weeks ago, and you alluded to the same thing when we chatted on the phone. Had a pretty slow hunt. It's been a slow fall for us overall.
It was we were in Torrington, out kind of that way, and then we hunted in western Nebraska as well. And we're with a good group. Had a good setup, and they're just we didn't see a ton of birds flying around. All the birds we did see flying around, seemed like they knew what was up, seemed kind of local. But how they move and why they move, everybody always asks where are the ducks, and that's kind of why we started this whole thing, because I was sitting in a blind wondering the same question. And now on a small scale, we can kind of help scratch that itch that the hunter, the bird watcher, the child might have about how do these birds actually move.
Yeah, the real-time data is something that's been missing from the waterfowl community. We know as a whole how the birds migrate. We know the different flyways.
Right.
Even the little sub-flyway sections are interesting when you get down to the local level. The guys here and that I hunt with and the folks in the area, we know where our birds come from for the most part, and when we can expect them roughly, and what pushes them down to us. And kind of it's a little flyway within a flyway, if you will.
Right.
But that bigger picture has been missing for a long time, and you kind of alluded to that in on your blog about the 50 ducks story, basically about that data was frustrating and hard to come by.
For sure, and it still is. And there are a handful of groups in North America that have permits and have the funding to do these telemetry studies. They're incredibly expensive to do, and they require a lot of federal, state, provincial permits to even get off the ground. A lot of scientific merit has to be proven before you can do it. And I'm not involved with that. My premise is that's awesome. You guys are doing fantastic stuff for flyways, habitat, wetland restoration, bag limits, predictive models. What I want to do is I want more people in more places to understand waterfowl, in the hope that leads to more people caring about it. Because if you don't have people, if we don't recruit more people to the cause, we're going to have a problem in the future, right? Because recruitment numbers are down, hunter numbers are down. We continue to lose habitat, and it's not just with ducks; it's with most these species that we love in North America. So this is my attempt to try and be part of the solution in kind of a new and creative way.
I love it. I love the fact that you're focused. Your part of the focus is on educators and in the classroom. As a former educator myself, anytime I could get my kids into real life, real time stuff and get them interested, it just upped the engagement, up the ante, and it gives those kids a stake in the game, and
for sure.
While there could be a lot said about hunter recruitment and numbers of hunters being down overall, there's a lot of things at work in all of that, opportunity being one of the hardest, most difficult things to come by nationwide. But let's take a step back real quick for those folks that might not understand. Explain what telemetry, how you're getting this information and what it looks like on a bird.
For sure. So we do it with our friends at Jack Miner on mallard ducks and the Canada goose. We have some big things planned for the spring as well that I don't want to say too much about right now. But the way it works on a duck is you take a backpack. It's solar powered. It weighs between 10 and 20 grams. They come in different sizes. And the way it works is it takes a GPS position, however often you set it. So ours take them once an hour, right? Twice a day, it takes your GPS position, it takes weather information, altitude, 3-axis acceleration. It has a timestamp. It takes a bunch of other, sweet little bits of information with it. And then once a day, the device turns on, so to speak, and it tries to find cell network. And then all of the data transmits through the cellular network to our back end. We do some stuff to it, and then we put it on the website, and it goes into a different back end for our academic partners who are using it for light pollution studies and different movement studies that they're working on. So it's getting the most out of each of these birds that has a backpack on it. A goose wears what you just imagine as a neck collar, like you've seen a banded goose before.
Right.
With a neck collar.
Yep.
It's super similar to that with the attachment. Same company makes them, and it's solar powered as well. Same deal. It takes all the same measurement. It's a little hardier because it's a lot bigger.
Right.
So you can do a little bit more with that data just because a goose is obviously a much larger bird.
And you're not going to see this on a bird in flight unless they're small. These backpacks are small.
It is. Yeah, they're real small. And I wish I had some pictures I could send you right now, but you will not see it on the bird in flight or on the bird in water until unless you got it in your hand.
Right.
It is much easier to see a band, an aluminum leg band on a bird than it is these backpacks. Yeah, so it's not like you can trophy hunt and target backpack birds.
Exactly. And I kind of think that's where I was going, because out here in Wyoming, we don't see a lot of banded birds, period.
Right.
I think in the, almost 20 years I've lived in Wyoming, I've shot 2 banded Canada geese, and it was a double. I went bang, bang, and they were both banded.
Right.
But growing up in the Mississippi Valley Flyway, I have a lanyard. It's not loaded with bands, but I have quite a few bands.
Right.
And they're all from the Mississippi Valley Flyway on Canada geese.
Right.
1 banded mallard, a banded wood duck, a banded woodcock back in the day, that was part of a local study with Northern Michigan University.
Yep.
But the bulk of those leg bands came from Canada geese in the Mississippi Valley Flyway in Michigan.
Right.
But neck collars were something that you could see on a bird resting. If it was and you could easily pick them out in flight if you were paying attention, looking for them.
Right.
And we did our fair share of trophy hunting. Right or wrong, we did it
for sure. And
they're visible. They're visible. You can see them, but not these backpacks.
Not these backpacks. And the neck collars for the geese, like the ones you're talking about, are the ones that people are recording observations of where the geese are in flight. So they want them to be bright green or red. The different states, different flyways have different colors. The neck collars, camouflage is the wrong word, but they blend into the goose's neck a lot better than a neon green, neck band does. So
right.
you can see the goose a little bit, but it's harder to.
Yeah, because like you're saying, those bright colors are what tipped us off. In Michigan always used green neck collars when they were doing it. Killed one of those over the years, and it was I didn't realize it until the dog brought it back and it had a neck collar on it.
Yeah.
But there was some orange neck collars taken over the years that you saw them. You're watching working birds over decoys, like that one on the right's got a neck collar.
Right.
A couple of years ago, I'm driving with the family. We always do a Mother's Day weekend trip through Yellowstone because we're so close. And there was an entire flock of Canadas on one of the sloughs that had yellow neck collars. Like 15 birds all had yellow neck collars, and you could see them from 200 yards away.
Right, which is a thing that gets talked about a lot. But there's a reason that deer hunters wear orange. It's easy to see.
Exactly.
Same with those neck collars.
Well, that is super cool. But how you talked about you were sitting you were on a duck hunt and you realized that you'd had a lack of understanding of duck movement.
Yeah.
And that kind of spurred what you guys do. Walk us through that, man, because I think a lot of people can relate to that.
For sure. So waterfowl hunting has played, and just hunting in general and being outdoors has played a crucial role in my life thus far. It's me and my dad, my brother, my grandfather, my uncles. It's a thing we always get to do together, right? You get to do it around Thanksgiving, you get to do it around Christmas. We shoot doves a lot. We get to manage for ducks and dove, and it's just a thing that brings us all together and that we deeply enjoy doing, right? And it connects us with nature. So I say all that to say that a couple of times a year, my dad and I will go on a hunting trip with a group of guys that we've been doing since I was little, for the last 20 years. And we go to Venice, Louisiana most years, and we fish and we hunt out there. And some years the ducks are there and some years they're not. And, we always go in January, right? And so we had a guide this one year who, bless him, wasn't the best of guide. And he ran us up on a mud flat with one of those, Go Devil things that we weren't going anywhere. I got a picture of it online, but we were stuck for a while. And so we were sitting there and we were looking up and we were talking about just that. Why are they here some years and why are they not? Coincidentally, I guess it's because the phones always listen to us. I stumbled across an article about some of these telemetry studies that they were doing in the state of Louisiana. Called around, got a little information, asked if I could see the data. And they told me it's just as nice as they could be what they were doing with the data. And that when it was published, I could see it, and that was going to be a while from now. And being impulsive and like most people, I want to know what the ducks are doing right now. And, that kind of led us down this path of, what goes into these telemetry studies? Who's trying to do it? How can we be a part of the solution for something that I find to be the most fascinating thing in the world? And so that led us down a 3-year journey of trying to find some folks that were interested in doing a telemetry project that, qualified to do it, that we could help fund it for them, and that believed in the same vision we have, which is, as well as the science, is getting more people to care. And so that's led us down that. This has been a thing that we've been doing for 3 years, trying to get it off the ground, building the website, building the back end, the web, all that stuff was pretty complicated. And we messed it up more than once along the way, but it has been a full-time job for me for last about a year. I've been doing it full time.
Wow. Well, people can, it was easy enough to find. Obviously, Google makes everything easy to find these days. And all I did to find you was 50ducks.com. It's 50 ducks in the Google search bar.
Yep.
And it popped right up. It was easy to find. You've got an interactive map, a sample map on there. How do folks get more involved and in tune with what you're doing? Obviously, you said you're launching an app, which is super cool.
Yeah, man, the app is going to be great. We launched in October. We started banding these birds in September with Jack Miner. Wanted to make sure everything was good, and we did we banded a few birds last year with our partners in Mexico, and we did that to make sure that that our back end worked, because we do some randomization of the live bird data, and we put it on delay, and we limit your zoom so that you can't just, okay, the bird's sitting on this pond off of Old South Road, I'm gonna go kill it.
Right.
So what you see is kind of where the bird is in real time, and then once the bird is gone, there's a second map, and you see exactly where the bird was. So that was a delicate balance we had to play with there.
Which is super smart on your part, because if that, obviously we talked about the trophy hunting aspect of bands, and bands are a big deal for waterfowlers.
For sure.
Backpack is even, you see the posts on Instagram and I look at this, I got a backpack bird, and you can't see them. And it could easily be misconstrued what you're doing as aiding hunters in finding these birds just to kill them. And that's not what you're telling me at all, which is
100%. And that's the first question we get asked a lot. And so, I want to make sure I say that what you see is kind of where a bird was yesterday. That's the way the website works with our live ducks. We randomize the data, meaning that when it comes to me, I randomize it. And so that bird is somewhere within a set radius of where that dot is. And that radius is pretty big. I won't lie to you. So if you think you can find the bird, it's not because it's on this website, because each of these birds represents a huge financial investment. It represents a huge part of our sample set for these studies. And I'm the last person in the world who wants you killing these birds. But with that being said, we have had some hunters in Ontario, in Michigan, kill a couple of these birds already, right? And it is not lost on me how excited they are when they call me, because my our phone number and email is etched on the side of it, so it says if found, call.
That's cool.
Yeah, well, they're mighty expensive, and we can reuse them. And everyone I've talked to, by the end of it, they're almost apologetic, which I don't want at all. But they're super excited, and I mail them a replica, because the expensive part's the hardware inside. Because I know they want to mount it, they want to put it, on the bird, they want to put it on a lanyard. I'll mail them a replica. If they mail me that one, we'll reuse it. and I appreciate you, being a friend of the program. So
that's super cool, man. I think that took, as a hunter, that just goes to show that you're not, and I'm not downplaying the role biologists play or state agencies play by any stretch, because it's super important what they do, and they do great work. But as a hunter who's doing this, you understand the hunter's side of it and the aspect of that. And there is that availability, that option to have some quid pro quo. They're like, hey, just send us that one. We'll send you the replica. That way they still get that trophy, I guess, if you could say it.
For sure. Cause it's, like a band, like you look at that tracker and you remember where it was, you remember the hunt, you remember who you were with, and it's a special moment. And I'm not trying to diminish that from you at all. I'm excited for you.
Right.
For me. But I'm excited for you. And as long as we just trade, it's kind of a no harm, no foul situation. And yeah, we certainly don't want to downplay what the biologists are doing. Without them, the North American conservation model as it relates to waterfowl is the best in the world. And that is entirely due to, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Bird Banding Laboratory, Canadian Wildlife Service, and Ducks Unlimited, all these nonprofits, right, who do such a great job. We're just coming at it from a different angle, and people need to understand who they're talking to. This thing is expensive, and this thing is 100% funded by me because I believe in it that much. We don't get any grant money. We don't have any big time donors behind us, and it's because we care and we want to be a part of it, and we don't think enough is being done in outreach to young people.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think that the outreach part of the side of it is super cool. I'm gonna relate a story when I got on your sample map.
Yeah.
And was playing around initially. I think everybody looks for that little colored dot that represents a bird that's in their area, roughly. Right. And there was a widgeon, an American widgeon 10, and on the sample map that had migrated into Wyoming. And he was collared or backpacked in, tagged, I guess you could say, in California in the Sac Delta. He went just like you would expect from a widgeon. He went all the way up the Pacific Flyway, all the way up into Alaska. And then he came inexplicably, switched flyways from the Pacific to the Central, came down through Saskatchewan into Montana. And from Montana, he drifted all the way down into eastern Wyoming, outside the little town of KC.
Yep.
And I lived over there, just north of there, and I used to guide fly fishermen in the ground, that little valley that he rested in west of KC, Wyoming. Right. I used to guide in there, and there's not much habitat for a duck in there, period, but there's little sloughs and some creeks. Right. It's like, yeah, I can understand why he'd be there. But the next move that this bird did, Greer, was he moved from there. He flew across the southern end of the Bighorn Mountains through some incredibly high country. And the next point on the map is in the Sweetwater Basin.
Right.
And there's the Sweetwater River flows through the Sweetwater Basin, and that is pretty much the only water in that entire area. And this bird did not set on the Sweetwater River. He settled, that little dot is a little tiny pothole basin in the desert. There is nothing out there except for antelope and sagebrush, sage grouse. And this bird sat down there, and I was fascinated by that. And he drifted from there. He flew pretty much straight southeast over into Nebraska, and there's some more dots in Nebraska, which is cool. But to be able to see that bird used a chunk of habitat that, if I were out there hunting, the only reason I'd be out there hunting would be to hunt antelope or sage grouse. And if I flushed a widgeon out there in the middle of that sagebrush desert, I'd be like, what are you lost? What are you doing out here? It is the last place you would expect to find a duck. And so it was really interesting to see that on there, and it captivated me immediately. And that's just on your sample map. You've got a lot more. If you buy a subscription and log in, there's a lot more data out there that's just going to grab people and get their attention.
Man, it's fun that you say that. I pulled up American Widgeon here on my second screen. You know, I can see that it flew 5,026 miles over 278 days of being banded, right? And just, you know, it's just a little taste of some of the data that we've got and that we're trying to present to, you know, to the user and to people to get them to where they understand, wow, what ducks do is really cool, right?
It's unreal.
It's the coolest thing in the world. We have a tremendous amount of historical data from the Pacific Flyway. If you go into that, I mean, I'm sure you can see it. A bunch of that data is from there. You know, our live birds from this fall are all going to be Atlantic and Mississippi Flyway birds, but it doesn't make it any less morbidly fascinating, you know, just because you're not in this flyway. Because that's really the point. The point's not to tell you on a grand scale when the ducks are moving, because you know, we will band 50 birds at Jack Miner this year, ducks and geese. You know, of that, a bunch of them are going to get killed during hunting season just through the nature of it. A bunch of them aren't going to ping every day because they're not in cell service. But every day you should be able to log on and see, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 birds and what they did since yesterday. And a lot of what they've done since yesterday is not move much, but every now and then one picks up and flies from Kingsville, Ontario into New Jersey, like we had one do last Thursday. And why did he do that? But it brings me, truly, it's the first thing I do every morning is I log on and I look at where my ducks are. And we let kids name the ducks. I don't know if you saw that on the live.
I did, man. There's a spoonbill. There's a northern shoveler in Wisconsin that I would assume a classroom named Scoop. And I was like, Scoop, that's such an awesome name for a shoveler.
Yeah. I'll tell you this, like I said, we got this thing out 70 days ago, and we're already in 22 states and 2 Canadian provinces that teachers have reached out. This platform is 100% free to teachers as well. If you're a teacher listening to this, if you know an educator, if you want to use this in the classroom, all you gotta do is email me. I'll get you set up for free. And we let kids name a bunch of the ducks as well. And so we have like a Fat Daddy, a Miss Quack Quack, a Jelly Donut, Min the Mallard, Bill Nye the Science Mallard, Buzz, Richard. You know, there's no bad name when a 4th grader sends it to me.
No.
And we do a little write-up about it. And like Buzz, for example, Buzz was our first mallard that you know migrated a lot this season. And it, you know, his write-up is Buzz the Mallard is proudly named and sponsored by the students at Lebanon High School in Lebanon, Missouri, after their school mascot. We hope Buzz inspires the students to engage in conservation efforts and help teach everyone more about the fascinating world of waterfowl. When Buzz moved, I sent, you know, the teacher that I am, you know, in contact with there, a little write-up and said, this is what Buzz did. And he was he called me. I mean, he's the most excited guy in the world. And that's what you can do. You can initially I didn't want to humanize the ducks, and now I looked at it from the kids' perspective. You got to make it fun for them. You got to make it fun for a kid that doesn't know anything about a duck, why they should care about Donald Duck or Jelly Donut. And so that's a little bit of what we're trying to do.
I think that is so cool. And I can imagine I'm going to put this in front of my kids and let them take a look at it this afternoon or this evening when we get done and with basketball and all this other stuff. But my kids are super invested in wildlife, you know, Thanksgiving. And we're fortunate to live where we do, but Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, they're like, Dad, can we go watch the mule deer?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, you bet. So we went up in the, you know, on the face of the mountains here where the mule deer migrate out of Yellowstone, and they're rutting right now, you know, and it's just, they watched bucks fight and they saw a couple big deer right from the truck, you know, and it was just fun because we're not hunting those deer because it's a really hard tag to draw, but it gives them engagement in their home, in where they live, in wildlife. And so, and it gets them engaged, as you said earlier, in the North American model of wildlife conservation, which I mean, let's be honest, Greer, there are massive threats to that model across the board, not just for waterfowl, but the North American model of wildlife conservation is under attack by animal rights groups and preservation groups because they feel like hunters shouldn't be the ones funding conservation.
Right. And it's a lack of understanding about what conservation is. And it all comes back to people's time, energy, and money. And what hunters do is they put their money where their mouth is. And through Pittman Robertson and through the Farm Bill and through all these different acts, we are conserving habitat and wildlife. And the thing that these conservation groups don't understand is we're on the same
Well,
team.
let's stop. Let's not call them conservation groups, because they're not. They're preservation groups.
Preservation groups.
And there's a huge difference in those two things. But yes, groups like the HSUS, the Humane Society of the United States. It's not your little old lady down the street running a shelter out of her garage that's taking in animals here and there. This is a large multi-billion-dollar group that's attacking hunting and conservation and the North American model as we know it.
This episode of the Wingmen Podcast is brought to you by Savage. Guys, I love my Savage Renegade. A couple years ago when we first partnered with Savage, I didn't quite know what to think of the Renegade. I hadn't been able to get my hands on one yet. I love the Savage line of rifles, obviously, but the new Savage Renegade didn't take very long to win me over. And I have to say, I've put thousands of rounds through a couple different guns now, and they do nothing but go bang and kill birds, which is what I need in a shotgun. I love the fact they're tough as nails. They're super reliable. I could change the fit if I need to. So the Savage Renegade, man, that's a winner. Knocked it out of the park. Thank you, Savage.
Right. And I won't call any groups out specifically because I'm not as familiar with them as I'm sure you are. But what we have to realize is that we should be on the same team, and what we both want is more wildlife, more access, and more of the natural world being preserved for future generations. The person that we should be against is the developer that is, destroying wetlands to put up condos, right? And so we get so entrenched in our views that we forget that we kind of want the same thing, and that's just the nature of people. And it's unfortunate, and we all are working for a common goal. I mean, someone whose stance is I don't hunt, so I'm not part of the problem, couldn't be more wrong.
Right.
And you couldn't be more wrong about that. If you are not directly donating or spending your time or involved in conservation efforts, then you're net negative on the solution. The hunter is doing more than you are 100% of the time. And so a big part of 50 Ducks is this isn't necessarily a hunting website. Like the Audubon Society has some stuff similar to this, just not with waterfowl. Like I want to recruit, bird watchers to this cause as well. I want to get into the bird watchers' pocket and use their money to fund these studies, to fund wetlands, restoration and conservation. So it could be a really uniting force, I hope, in my vision of what it could be.
I think that's solid, man. And I think your approach of getting it in front of kids and the teachers in the classroom is brilliant, because it gets, like we said earlier, it gets kids at a ground level invested in it. And then they can see, there's a hunting component to this too. And maybe hunting's not what I'm hearing that it is. Cause for the kid that's in a school in Minneapolis,
right,
that doesn't hunt at all,
right,
can still go on and be connected to this,
right,
and be like, wow, this is super cool.
Right.
I agree with you, because it's one of those deals where, we need to protect hunting and the North American model at all costs.
Right.
But we do want the same things. We want more birds. We want more wildlife on the landscape. We want wild places.
Right.
Where if you're a bird watcher, you can go watch migration, or if you're a hunter, you have a place to hunt. We're all kind of striving for that same big overarching goal.
Right. And how we get there is different. And what you described with your kids is part of the access thing that we're talking about. A kid in Minneapolis, a kid in Atlanta, a kid in New York, they can't do that. But what they all have is access to a laptop at school or a phone at their house, where you can bring the sky to their screen, so to speak, and you can use technology to say, this is what nature is. This is how cool migrating birds are. Do you know anything about migrating birds? I wonder what other kind of birds migrate. All of a sudden, the kid's super into ospreys with the golden eagle. Right? That's a win. That's a huge win for me. And so that's just that you got to spark curiosity and then let them go from there.
Yeah, and ducks are waterfowl in particular are such a dynamic thing because they move so much. There's lots of birds migrate, but very few species of birds migrate on the grand scale that waterfowl do.
Right.
I'm looking at a cinnamon teal that's way down in Mexico, right, on your sample map, way down there. Well, that could have very likely been a bird that my kids and I could watch on the marshes here in April.
Sure.
The only time we see knowingly see cinnamon teal is in the spring when they're reverse migrating to breed, and they're all colored up in full plumage. They come through here. I'm sure their birds follow the same path in the fall, but we don't. They're eclipsed at that time of year, and you wouldn't know the difference between that and a blue-winged teal when you shoot one in September.
Right. If you're looking at a sample map, there's a lesser snow goose that's right on the Texas-Mexico line that you ought to click on and just have your mind blown about what a migrating bird can do. This bird traveled through 3 flyways over 874 days and flew 41,000 miles. It went as far west as the Baja Peninsula. It went as far east as northern Kentucky. It went through Texas. It went through the Dakotas. It went through Montana. It went down into Louisiana. It went into central Mexico. And why it does that, I mean, we can all agree that's cool. We can disagree about why it did it, but that's not what I'm here to do. I'm no scientist. I make no claim to be a scientist. I can tell you how far it traveled, and I can do some of the code on the back end, but all I can do is show it to you and say it's cool.
Well, it is cool because you think about it and it makes you wonder why. And when you have the information that you have on those little blips on their pathway correlates with dates. There's dates and times because, like you said, it's got to clock in with cell data.
Mm-hmm.
And that widgeon I was talking about earlier, that bird traveled across areas that there's no cell data.
Right.
I mean, he hit and it looks like he did it all in like one fell swoop and flew, I don't know how many hundreds of miles in one swoop. Probably not the case. Probably just wasn't in cell coverage at all during those time periods. And quite honestly, where he blipped in Wyoming in that Sweetwater Basin area, I can't believe you got cell service out there. There's hardly any out there, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah. The way it works too is, and I didn't explain this right, and that's my fault, is every hour it takes a GPS, it takes all that data we talked about, and it stores it in its internal hard drive. It backlogs it. So if it misses its window that night, you get 2 days worth the next day. And if it backlogs for 3 months, you get 90 days worth in one day. So
okay, that makes sense.
It's pinging. It's just not coming to us yet. So the only way you don't get that data is if that bird dies in the prairie potholes, during nesting season, right? Then you wouldn't get a bunch of data back. But that's just the limiting factor currently with this technology.
Right. But back to the date and time, it would be very easy to go back, and especially if you're one of the guys that journals a lot or keeps tight track of what birds were doing on certain days and according to what the weather was like. It'd be really easy to go back and take that snow goose, for example, and go, okay, why is this bird doing what he's doing now? Like you said, you're not a scientist, but we can make educated guesses and go back and look at, what was the weather like that? We know snow geese don't like snow, which is interesting.
Right.
But maybe there were weather events. I'm sure if you went back in time and looked at the data, looked at what weather was doing on those days, it would give you an educated guess as to why that bird was moving. What were the wind currents? Snow geese, they migrate high. Geese in general migrate really, really high.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll ride those air currents or that jet stream. And that would play a large part in how that bird got pushed around or did what it did.
Right.
Just super interesting. And what you could do with that then is, as a hunter, I could take those data points and I could look at that and extrapolate it across, weather events and go, okay, now I have a rough idea that when I see these weather patterns again, or when I have this weather coming again, I might be able to expect these birds are just one of thousands, and it might help you. Like I'm sitting here right now, Greer, with basically no birds in my pocket. There's some around, but not very many.
Yeah.
And I know where they are. I know exactly where they are. Canada's frozen solid. Northern Montana's frozen solid. It limits the scope of search as to where I think my birds are.
Right.
But looking ahead at the weather, I don't have any weather coming between now and Christmas.
All right.
In the long range forecast, the mountains do their own thing, so you never know what's going to happen. But I can look ahead and go, okay, in 4 days, I'm going to get a hard north wind event, and it's going to blow for 2 days straight. It's probably going to blow in some colder temps, colder air. Even if we don't get snow, I'm going to have, 20, 30 mile an hour winds out of the north. I'm going to be able to go, I need to be scouting and I need to be in the field looking.
Yeah.
And you could go back and look at those blips and go, wow, that bird covered a lot of ground between here and there.
Right.
It's just super interesting, and the more intel you have as a hunter, the more you're going to be able to put 2 and 2 together and work it out.
100%. And we want it to be as nerdy as you want it to be for your user. And then we want it to be as easy as it can be for your second grader. But if you look at our live map, and we don't have it for some of the older birds because we did not ban those. We got that, from USGS.
Sure.
We got it from state agencies. We just put it on this map to show people, the live birds where we're getting the information with it. Every break point, every one of those green dots you see for the mallard, if you hover over it, it tells you the pressure, the temperature, humidity, wind speed, and cloud cover for that date and time at that location. So we take what you're saying about this journaling and do it for you on the website. So you can see, I got a north wind, I got an east wind, it's blowing 4.61 miles an hour, and this bird's going 300 miles east for whatever reason, right? And so it lets you play with that too. It lets you, play scientist, for lack of a better word, right?
I think that is so cool, that data. And it all comes from being stranded on a crappy duck hunt in Louisiana on a mud flat.
It does. It comes from a guy that had no idea where he was trying to take us through a marsh, and we ran up on a mud flat and just kept dirt deviling it up in there deeper and deeper.
Oh, dude, I love it. I love it. Yeah, when I was first introduced to this, I was like, what? Okay, you got my attention. What is this? And the more we talk and the more I dig into this, I'm just like, wow, from the educational aspect to hunting application, it's just stuff that's never been available before.
No, and I'll be honest with you, for 3 years as we've been trying to do it, I keep saying, we're going to get close to launching and someone else is going to do it and no one is. And at some point it'll just be me, I guess. But this is a thing that everyone should want to see. In our app release we got coming this afternoon, in fact, we put leaderboards in there. We've got 7-day leaderboards, 30-day leaderboards, lifetime leaderboards for distance traveled, for a number of GPS points. We'll have speed on there soon. We'll have altitude on there soon. You talked about birds flying high. We had a shoveler leave Mexico City last year that flew 17,000 feet for 25 hours, right? Like, you wouldn't believe that, but I got the data to show you. And so that's just, we've got all this data. We're super new with the platform. And so we're figuring new ways to bring it to you in a way that's consumable, where you don't just go, well, what am I looking at? So we're constantly working through that.
Well, and your pricing structure on the website for membership seems pretty modest.
Yeah, there should be no barrier to entry. I mean, it costs less than 2 boxes of shells for your hunter. And it costs a lot less than a pair of binoculars for a bird watcher. And we are not a nonprofit, but all of this money is going to, we have a give back program with Jack Miner. We have a give back program with Tierra Davis, and we will have a give back program with any other nonprofit we work with. Again, we have personally funded the entirety of this thing, from these backpacks to the creation of the website. 100% of the funds at this point are just going to keeping this thing rolling another year. Right. And it's expensive. I mean, these backpacks cost over $1,000 a piece, right? So, I mean, it's an expensive deal.
Yeah, that is amazing. It really is. We'll kind of switch gears a little bit.
Yeah, man.
Let's talk about the app. So sure. It's launching this afternoon.
Yes, sir.
I imagine it's on App Store. You can get it wherever you get your apps, I would assume. What are folks going to be looking at for pricing on that app?
Same thing. If you have the app or the website, you have access to both. The maps are a little different just because we use you use Apple Maps on the iPhone and you have to use different stuff on Android, but none of that really matters. It's the same data. It's presented to you a little differently. We have leaderboards on the app. We have more write-ups online, like in the blog, but it's cross-functional. If you have the app, you have access to the website. If you have access to the website, you have access to the app. And if for some reason that's not the case, please call me because we got a problem.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. That's so cool, man.
But it's $9.99 a month, and it's $59.99 a year. Their QR code, their coupon codes floating around out there for all sorts of people. We have a discount code for veterans. We have a discount code for first responders. All it is thank you vets or thank you FR, first responder. The QR codes for that. It's free for teachers. I don't think I'm very good at making money, but we are good at making maps.
I love it. Well, it's a passion project for you, man. And sometimes the passion projects pay the bills, and sometimes you do it because you love it,
For sure. And we still hope that it can do both. And there's no reason we can't really blow this thing up and we can't get a lot more groups. And, there's no reason that in a couple of years we can't have Eagles on this thing, right? We can't partner with groups like Hawkwatch International or, the International Crane Foundation. There's no reason it can't be more than just ducks. But we start with what we know, which is waterfowl, and we see if people care, and we go from there.
Well, and I think the reason that is so interesting to me is obviously I'm a waterfowl guy. I'm a bird hunter. I'm a hunter through and through. But if you told me I could only hunt one thing the rest of my life, it's probably going to be birds, specifically waterfowl.
Yeah.
And but I mean, migration studies and telemetry studies are not new in the world of wildlife. They've been around forever.
Yeah.
Well, as long as the technology's been available.
Right.
But I think having the ability to go on, let's go back to the mule deer study. Mule deer as a species they're not doing great. There's areas like where we live where they're thriving, but as a general rule, they're not doing great. So there's a lot of money thrown at studying these animals, and telemetry studies and migration studies have become huge.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that the agencies struggle with is making that data readily available for people.
Right.
So they can go on and get invested. I mean, it's out there. You can find migration maps, and there's some real-time stuff out there. But man, I think no pun intended, the sky is the limit for what you're doing to even get bigger. 50 ducks, you could call it 500 deer. I mean, it's huge. It's so cool.
Right. And you're right. And there is a delicate balance between the researchers doing what they're doing. Again, I mean, we've touched on all the good stuff that they do for the conservation model. There's a real protection around data from these researchers who have a sense of ownership in it because they've done the work to gather it, and it's their project and it's their baby and it's their life. And I'm trying to be an ally there and just put a spotlight on something that maybe not enough people know about. And so for any state agencies out there, like there's a way that we can work together in whatever. If you don't want exact data ever going on this map, we'll just put the live data on there, randomize it, and then it'll disappear after 3 weeks. Right. I mean,
there's ways of doing it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a super reasonable guy when it comes to that. It's not my way or the highway in the least. Because I'm looking to be an ally. If we can do that, then we're really making a difference. And like you say, public engagement is something that's, the state agencies, even thus far, like I've dealt with some people calling me with just some ridiculous statements, comments, questions, ideas, right? And so I know state agencies, the more you get the spotlight, the more you have to deal with that. So I understand that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's take a 180, man. Let's talk hunting a little bit.
Sure.
I love the way this podcast has gone, and I think we've covered a lot of awesome ground, and I would encourage everybody that's listening out there to go to 50ducks.com, go check it out, go download that app. I think just check out the sample map and then go buy it because go check it out. I mean, for $9.99 a month, I spend more in a week on Zins than I do on that. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of people probably do.
Go ahead and buy the year and forget you paid for it and just enjoy it. Buy it for somebody else for Christmas. We got Gift and App on there.
There you go.
Yeah. We'll put a code on there, Wingmen as well. You use Wingmen code, we'll give you 10% off. So
love it. Love it. That's awesome. And when we do this description, I'll put a link to the website right down in the podcast description. You guys can just drop down, click it, and go. It'd be really simple, really easy to do. But well, Greer, let's talk hunting, man.
Sure.
This is a hunting podcast, and what have you been doing? You guys just you are in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken.
I was in I'm from Middle Georgia. I'm from Macon, Georgia. I got married earlier this year, and now I live in Jacksonville. So I'm a Floridian, and I'm just fighting off all sorts of people down here. But new to Florida, I like it. I'm just teasing. My new family lives here.
Are you wearing that Bulldogs pulled over, man? I mean,
I'm a big Georgia fan. I got a bunch of that stuff behind me back there. I'm going to the game this weekend. I love Georgia football. My dad's a big Tech fan, Georgia Tech fan. So we had a rough weekend over Thanksgiving together, but it's all in good fun. But yeah, we just got back from Torrington, hunted eastern Wyoming into western Nebraska. There weren't any ducks, but we did hunt predators with thermals, which I have never done before. And if I lived out there, my credit card would be maxed out tomorrow getting some of that equipment. We went with a couple of guys because there weren't any ducks and they were trying to find something to do. And he said, I got some friends that can take you, shoot some coyotes. And I said, say no more. And man, it was pitch black dark. I couldn't even see, the guy was following. And we walked a good long ways in the dark. And he had a spotting scope, thermal. And he said, all right, let's sit down right here, be kind of quiet. And he had an AR souped up. And he had a thermal scope on the top. And we took that lens off. And I was like, damn. And you're looking at coyotes a couple hundred yards away, and it's like, well, that one's sitting, that one's kind of smelling it. He blows that call, and they start running, and man, it was fun.
Yeah, buddy. It's the thermal stuff is a whole different ball of wax. You start getting into the predator hunting, it's and you're doing something great for waterfowl and upland birds at the same time when you're knocking down some coyotes. So
we made that joke. We made that joke when the gun went off the first time. It's all part of conservation.
That's 100% correct.
But
100% correct.
Man, that was fun. But I'm actually going out to flying into Great Falls, Montana. I'm going back to Jack Miner next week to do some work up there with those guys, for 50 ducks. And then I'm going to Great Falls, Montana with Bill and the guys from Spartan Forge. I'm going out there to hunt with them. And so that'll be super fun. I hadn't asked. They told me they would pay for me to come, and I didn't ask any more questions about what we were going to be doing. So I'm excited to go out there with them and do that.
That'll be a good time. Yeah, that'll be super cool. Well, you get out this way, Great Falls isn't terrible far. In the West, it's different. When you were in Torrington, I'm like, well, just swing by. It's not that far.
Yeah. I looked at the maps, and we're 3.5 hours away.
Well, it's more like 6, but in Wyoming, that's just like, all right, let's get together and hunt. But it didn't work out. But same thing here, man. We've got we're waiting on birds. I've been a couple times, but it's wild in this part of Wyoming. Our actual productive part of duck season really mimics the South very, very closely. We get a lot of ducks that winter here.
Uh-huh.
And just don't go any further. And you'd think all the teal are gone. It's November in Wyoming.
Right.
But we did a hunt the other day and we decoyed more teal than we did mallards.
When does y'all season go out?
So we don't stop until like the 21st of January.
You got a long time. If y'all get some birds show up, you shoot me a text. I'll be out there.
All right. We can make that happen. Yeah, it's one of those deals that we open. Usually we have two splits. We open in September for a couple weeks, and you're shooting those resident birds that were raised here or early migrators. But yeah, the meat and potatoes of it is from Thanksgiving until the close.
And people like misconstrue the migration as all happening at once, and it's all super standard. A bunch of these birds that we banded at Jack Miner have not. They've flown around. Some of them are like In different places like St. Clair, and have flown like into Michigan, into Ohio. But most of them, we talked about a couple that have flown a long way, but most of them haven't done much yet. And that's because it's not super cold and they don't have to. It's supposed to snow up there while I'm up there, and that'll push new birds in, pushing birds out. But, like you say, this when you kill birds is a toss up.
Yeah. And for us, it is, it's obviously cold and snow dependent, but it's also highly variable on what the wind's doing. If we get hard wind, which hard wind for here can be 60, 70 miles an hour, right. Those birds they'll get up and go, and then they'll turn around 2 days later and go right back. And so wind for us is as important as cold and snow.
Yeah.
We don't see birds until our best duck hunting is always when it's almost dangerous to be out there.
Yeah, the worse the weather, the better it is to hunt.
It really is. We had our last day of duck season last year. I spent 6 hours down at my best duck hole with a chainsaw and a spud bar, breaking off literally metric tons of ice, trying to create a spot that was safe enough the birds didn't care. There was a 6-foot slick of water running down the river.
Right.
But I couldn't put a dog in it. I had no place to put decoys, and it wasn't safe to hunt. So we had to open up a 200-yard chunk, and then the river did the rest in the night. We got down there, and it was more than enough water, more than enough. But if we don't have that, we don't have birds. There's some, but yeah, we're pretty dependent on that stuff out here. So it's really interesting talking to all the guys in the southern part of the U.S. and they're talking about what they're seeing, and it really closely mimics what we have here too.
Right.
This episode's brought to you by Federal Premium. Guys, I've been shooting federal shot shells for a really long time. Whenever I had to scratch up money from whatever chores I had to do and jobs I had to do when I was a kid, I always grabbed a box Federal Premium. It worked for me back then, and it still works for me today. Everything from the TSS heavyweight black cloud loads to the traditional black cloud loads to the blue box speed shock and now the new heavy bismuth loads. Federal's got a load out there for your price point, your budget, and your level of performance that you're looking for. So be like me, reach for Federal. That is my unashamed opinion.
Right. It's fun to see that. I won't say a predictive pattern, but kind of as to what makes birds move in different places. There are some overarching themes to it across flyways in different states. It's of course different, but like you say, you need wind to make it. If it's still, birds are going to sit.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and that's what we're getting now. It's just is what it is. But I just haven't been doing a lot of duck hunting. Looking forward to some cold and getting some birds, but it's been slow this year, and talked to a lot of guys across the board that it's been slow for them.
Do y'all kill many geese out there? I know
Lots.
you said a couple banded ones, but
Lots. Yeah, we have kind of a subset of the central flyway here that they go back and forth between Montana and here because our water doesn't freeze, because it's so they're big rivers. And so they don't freeze, like the Yellowstone or the Bighorn. I'm not going to drop any more names, but they don't freeze, so they hold geese, and then those geese are concentrated around wherever there's agriculture, which in this part of the world is very minimal. It's relegated completely to the river bottoms because it's the only place there's water.
So do you hunt them mostly over water, or you hunt them out of field? It sounds like
both.
Field.
Both. It depends. There's with corn prices being down across the board, not as many guys put in corn this year. We're a big barley producing area here. And but the thing about it is, because it's all irrigated farming, they get stuff tilled under, so there's not a lot of waste grain that's left on those fields. Corn stubble a little bit. You'll find some barley stubble, but those birds do a lot of feeding in wherever they can find it, and you can't always obviously get access. Excuse me. So if we can get a field shoot, that's what we prefer on honkers, but we do shoot a lot of geese over water. I usually let them fly out from a spot in the morning, go do their feed, and we'll bomb down there, 9 o'clock in the morning and
Right.
shoot them as they come back. And
shoot them in 1s and 2s instead of 50.
well, unfortunately, a lot of times it's big groups. Like the weather was so nice last year in particular that when they would come back, they'd all get up and there'd be 1,000 geese that would come back at once. And it's like, and it's like, okay, well, let them swing, let them work, and try to pick out at the edges, and then we'll pick up little groups here and there as we get them. But
right,
yeah, it's a little different. It's a little different in that regard. But I have found over the years that ducks and geese are night and day. They're polar opposites in how they work to decoys.
Yep.
Ducks on water tend to be way more cautious. They'll circle, swing,
right,
and they'll look. And if anything's not quite right, you're not on the X. They don't want to do it.
Right.
Ducks have it in dry field situations.
Yeah.
Ducks are insane. They don't swing. They just bomb in. If you've got motion and you're where they want, and you're on the feed where they want to be, they don't hesitate. And
they just whiffle right in.
Oh yeah. And big wads, and they just right in on you. Geese are the exact opposite. Geese, especially honkers, will work and work and work and work over dry land. And usually that first swing is when you're going to get the best opportunity at them. They're either going to be decoying and feet down, or they're going to swing, and every pass they're going to get further out.
Yeah.
On the water, geese are a lot more apt to be very responsive to the call and very willing to dump right into your decoys.
Wow.
It is night and day different. And so because of that, we do quite a bit of goose shooting over water on loafing spots during the middle of the day.
That makes sense. We, in Georgia, around Macon, we had a couple of spots, and down in Haneyville, we had some spots, and it's all resident geese there, and so you shoot them. The young ones aren't very smart at all, but anytime we've been out west, a lot of those goose hunts in the fields, you're pass shooting them, and everyone's shooting at once at 50 yards with, double BBs. And that's not super fun. I'd much rather,
Right. Yeah. We had, I'm a little more picky than that on geese, but you got to be willing to call it on like I said, on that first, maybe that second swing. Cause if they're going to swing, they may come over wide, go downwind, and then hook, and you can tell it's like, okay, these ones are going to do it, and they're going to land right next to the blind. And when they're feet down and back flapping, you're shooting them at 10 yards and 15 yards, and you're shooting them like a turkey, you're shooting right in the head.
Right.
That's what obviously we aim for, and we do kill a lot of birds that way.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lot of, you got several groups working at once and geese lined up, and it's like, okay, these ones are going to side slip over here. This next group's centered up, but they're 30 yards and they're coasting. Like, shoot them, one of those deals.
That's where I do not envy any sort of guide at all. When you have to make a decision, you go try and let the birds get any closer and pass one more time. Because when you never know what I would like to think that we are very wonderful clients, very understanding of how this all works. But you run into some people that are just assholes, as is the nature of life. And
right.
You don't call a shot and those birds go away. I can only imagine the lip. We've been with some groups before that are like that, where, you have to hunt with some other folks and they just get lippy, or they cannot make themselves wait. And so that's an etiquette matter that could be its own podcast.
No, man, we could get into that like crazy. I see that with ducks a lot on the river here, because there's so much habitat for those birds. They want to go out usually and feed in the morning someplace dry, and then they'll come back and they'll spend all day feeding in riffles on aquatic insects and vegetation. Or we have a lot of Russian olives that overhang the rivers out here, and they'll get right up in them and eat those olives. And if you're not, one of the tricks is if you can't get on the spot, like on the X, you're trying to suck birds in, and you're using massive amounts of decoys, and you're putting out spreads that are like, they look way, way different. It's not just little groups of ducks here and there. It's a big group line. Some of them are resting on an ice shelf. The rest of them, you got them under Russian olives, so they look as real as you can.
Yeah.
And yeah, we definitely shoot birds in the face, feet down as often as we can. But man, we shoot a lot of birds they're doing, the cupped up, swinging by at 35 yards.
Right.
That type of deal. We shoot a lot of those too, just because there's so much habitat up and down the river. They don't have to necessarily be where you are.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you another question as the expert. Well,
Use that term very, very loosely, Greer.
Your answer can be as expert or as not as you claim it is. I had a guy that we were doing something with one time who wouldn't let you drive your truck into the field because he said that geese can see the tire tracks and they know what that means. Do you put any stock in that? You ever heard that before? Give a lot of credit to a goose, but that guy knew how to kill them. And whether that was a product of that or a product of a lot of other stuff.
Where we are here, no.
Yeah.
Not at all. Where I could see that being a factor is growing up in Michigan in the Lower Peninsula, hunting resident Canada geese in the late season in December and January. When you're hunting a bird that might be 20 years old and he's lived his entire life in the same place and they don't migrate.
Right.
And they know every blade of grass and every stick in the fence row. Yeah, those birds would get highly in tune to anything out of place. There's an old story that Gordon McQuarrie wrote about back in, it's part of a story in one of his books, and talking about ducks seeing your footprints on the beach and going back and forth. And the only time I think I've seen that become an issue is when you're going out and coming in and there's fresh snow on dirt.
Okay.
And you're creating paths that from the air, from the ground, you don't think anything of them, but from the air, they don't look natural at all. Right. And they're fanning out from your hide. And I do think highly pressured birds that have been in an area a long, long time, they might pick up on that and be like, that looks a little out of place. But yeah, I think that's highly variable. It's possible, but like you said, that's giving a bird a lot of credit.
For sure. I wanted to get our resident experts' advice.
Yeah, that's the only time I could say that is, like I said, on those birds that live in an area and they're really tuned into their surroundings. Conceptually,
a bird that is 15, 20 years old, it knows what's going on and it, like anything out of place. Yeah.
Yeah, those Canada geese that we used to hunt, those non-migratory giants.
Yeah.
Down in the Lower Peninsula, where Sean Stahl is and those guys, those birds, they live a long time. And they would get to the point where they were almost unkillable, and they'd fly over, they'd come because they got to feed, they got to move, but they'd go land 200 yards from your decoys. And if they did come in, they would walk into your decoys like a turkey.
Right.
Just weird stuff. But that's such a unique case that,
right.
It's definitely interesting.
Well, talking to those guys at Jack Miner and getting to know their deal a lot, the way that they do most of their trapping is they got the same trap that Jack Miner himself had 100 years ago.
Right.
And they got 2 ponds behind it, and there's a cut right between them, and they've laid gravel and they feed on top of that. And then around that is probably 20 yards across. They got a big trap built, right, with chicken mesh and metal doors that they bait, and they drop the doors from a deer stand. They just pull the cord and it drops. With the ducks, it has 4 doors, so to say, right? You put 4 different mechanisms that can fall. With the ducks, you just open one of them, and so they'll go in, and if they take a left, there's a door on either side, and they can't, like, they'd be confused, and you could probably catch them without pulling the 4th door shut, right? But they said with those geese, and they said with the ducks, it doesn't bother them all. They're swimming there and stand on the gravel and swim, and they're swimming to the chicken. They won't know what they're doing, and it doesn't bother them. They said with those geese, if you do not have all 4 doors open, they will not swim into that trap. They said if the back is closed, they will not swim into there, just as a matter of being more skittish than a duck and being a little smarter and probably more with it. But
yeah, geese are definitely more switched on, I guess, more aware of, as a general rule, of their surroundings. And I think that's why we have geese here right now that have been here. They live here, and they literally, they'll do something different every day. When like they'll be in one field 2 days in a row, and then they'll be 10 miles away in another field the next day. And it's like they know where all the feed is, and they just don't create a pattern. They're just completely random. Way harder than ducks. Like ducks will, good grief, ducks here, they'll pound a cornfield until there's nothing left. And a lot of it's at night. We see a lot of that, call them vampire ducks, and they feed all night long in the dry land. You're shooting them in the morning at, right at first light, and their feet are covered in dirt because they've been out in the field all night long.
Well, it's funny you mentioned, nocturnal movement, which is so anecdotal. People always talk about hearing birds fly at night, seeing birds, at night. Why don't we ever see the birds migrate? We don't have a big sample set so far with these bird movement that we've tagged, but the 3 that have moved this year a distance of more than 200 miles out of Jack Minor have all started after 10 p.m. and they flew through the night, and then they landed the next morning.
That's wild.
2 of them, I think, they left between 10 and 11 and landed between 7 and 8. And then the other one landed between 5 and 6 the next morning, left about 9 o'clock. So it's interesting that in these long migratory movements from the birds that we banded in Mexico last year, same deal. They take off and move in the night, and whether they all do that or some of them do it, it'll be fun to see and keep following along with that.
It makes you wonder why, that's the way my brain works. And I'm immediately like, why is that? And obviously there'd probably be a million theories and million ideas behind it. But yeah, I've wondered that for a long time, how often those birds migrate, especially at night, because we know they feed at night a lot. And then especially this time of year for us, when the weather's nice, you don't see them, because they're feeding all night long. They'll be hitting those fields right at sunset or even right at the last light, and they'll be tornadoing into a cornfield or a barley stubble field, and they'll feed out there for a couple hours. They might go back, loaf, and then come back. And during the day, you've literally only got a couple hours to shoot ducks that are active in the morning.
For sure.
Because they're just loafing during the day someplace, and they don't move. They just hunker down and rest.
I like to write, is what I've learned about a lot of this too. And so we have a blog, and we have some other folks that help us write the blog. So they're not all mine, but one of the lines that I used was just in the early that anyone could see if they're looking at this data is ducks move a lot, but a lot of what a duck does is being really still. And like, if you break down how often the duck is in flight, it is a minuscule portion. Like, you think ducks migrate. Yeah. A lot of what a duck does is hang out where it is and, or, loaf from feeding to roosting, etc. But we, through this small sample set, again, putting all the modifiers in there for people that are going to tell me I'm wrong. Large scale flight movements make up less than 5% of any of the birds that we've tagged total movement. So 95% of GPS pings, and you get 1 an hour, which I understand. 19 out of 20 of those, the duck is still.
Wow. Yeah.
Again, it's a small
amazing
sample set. I'm happy to say I'm wrong. If you get something that says I'm wrong, I'm not going to fight you.
Well, it makes sense though, because if you look at wildlife across the board, the amount that they actually move around is pretty minimal. I mean, you look at your dog. I see your lab wandering around in the background, and even my young lab, my old lab obviously sleeps the majority of the day, but even my young lab sleeps. You look at him out in the backyard right now, he'll be laying in a sunny spot, and he'll lay there for hours. He'll get up, stretch, he might walk around a little bit, but they just don't move around all that much. There's some studies on grizzly bears that's been really, really interesting, and about how much they actually move around, and it's not near as much as you think.
That's a really good example with the dog. Like, when you look at that dog right there, that dog gets run first thing in the morning, it gets run at lunch, and it gets run most days after I get done. And then the rest of the day, it's very happy laying right there on that little pad until I put it outside, and then it just lays by the fence.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, mine, same deal. Mine get run most weeks, multiple times, throughout the week, in big runs. I'm a firm believer in roading my labs. I think that makes them good citizens in the house. And
What does roading mean? I don't know that term.
That I can't walk fast enough to wear my dog out.
Right.
So I use the truck.
I got you.
I'll take him out someplace where there's no chance he's going to get hurt or hit, and which is a lot out here. Obviously, we got a lot of open country.
Right.
And I'll just go. And he knows to stay away from the truck. And I'm watching. Obviously, you got to be careful with him. But yeah, I'll do 5, 6, 7 miles in the truck at, just rolling along slow, and he'll be out front just coursing. If I do 5 miles in the truck, he's done 10.
Right.
And he's going. And then I'll throw some wind sprints in there.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, you're going to sniff that, and I take off, and then he's got to catch me,
Yeah.
And I don't do that with my old dog, obviously, anymore. But with the young dog, that's the only way. It's the only way I can.
The only way you can wear him out.
Exactly. And he's a really good citizen when he's like that. Pheasant hunting's really good for him. He's in incredible condition right now because we've been hunting so many pheasants because we don't have any ducks.
Yeah.
And so he's been running in the uplands like crazy, And the other day, Thanksgiving morning, we hunted pheasants for 4 or 5 hours, and I put the turkey on before we left on the smoker and let the wife handle the rest. And then I was like, all right, guys, I got to be back by noon. I got to go,
Yeah.
And, but even when we were done, he didn't want to jump up in the back of the truck with all the other dogs. We had about a mile to get back to where we were all parked. And he just trotted along behind the pickup like it was no big deal. And he'd hunted pheasants all day.
Right.
And his face is he got a big cut on his nose, and he's all beat up from running around in the uplands, but it makes him a machine hunting geese in a field or hunting ducks in the river.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't get tired, doesn't get worn out. I don't have to worry about him getting tired fetching a handful of ducks out of the river.
Right. I was going to say, if you get him running behind the truck after a full day of pheasant hunting, you can go pick up. Don't matter how many geese or ducks you kill.
Right. And, and that's a thing out here for us when we're hunting water. It's big water and it's fast. It's western trout streams. It's a trout stream. The one we hunt all the time is full of trout, and it looks like it's fast. And you try to hunt where there's, where a dog's not going to get himself in trouble.
Right.
But yeah, he can retrieve birds all day. We pheasant hunted the one day, and then the next morning we went out and hunted some ducks, just a fun buddy hunt. We shot a few, and we had one of Hondo's daughters there. She's a year, so we wanted to get her some work. And he's steady for the most part. He likes to break when I shoot.
Yeah.
And we're working on that. So I had him leashed to a small tree next to the blind, and I wasn't doing any shooting. Anyway, I stood up to shoot. We killed 3 birds, and I looked down, and he's gone, and so's the tree. And he's out in the river pulling a tree behind him, fetching a duck, brought it back, no problem. Like it's not even attached to him, know. And it's like, yeah, I might have you in too good a condition, bud.
Yeah, I'm gonna hard to wear you out.
Oh my gosh, my goodness! But well, Greer, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I knew it was going to be because I love what you're doing. I think it's highly beneficial for ducks in general and hunting as well. And I just love your whole ethos behind all of this, man. I hope we get a chance to meet in person and do some hunting. I will definitely keep you in the loop as to what's going on out here.
Yeah, man. I appreciate that. And
Billings is only an hour and a half away. I can pick you up in the airport.
Man, if you call my wife and tell her I'm staying a couple more days, I'm all in.
I'll have my wife make that call.
We can just get our wives together.
There you go. There you go.
How we're letting them down.
Well, guys, go and check out 50 Ducks. Check out that app this afternoon. It's going to drop. Maybe wait till tomorrow, so so you can find it easy enough. Spend the $9.99, get the yearly, whatever you want to do, and make this happen. Because what Greer's doing at 50 Ducks is super cool, super important. Use the code Wingmen. Thank you for doing that, Greer. And I will put a link to 50 Ducks in the description of this podcast. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. Hey, I want to give a special shout out to our sponsors. Thank you to Cryptech for the awesome gear that we get to wear all the time. Thank you, High Mountain Seasonings, for taking our already delicious ducks and geese that we shoot and helping us turn them into things like awesome brats and sausage. And then a huge shout out to Federal Premium. The Federal ammunition I've been shooting it since way before I was doing Wingmen, and I've always been in love with Federal Premium right there. Check it out. Thank you to Federal. Loophole Optics, you guys are awesome. Performance eyewear is what we use more than anything on the Wingmen side, and love it. Best quote unquote sunglasses. They don't like to call them that, but that's the easiest way for folks to connect with them. But guys, give those at Loophole a check. And of course, couldn't do what we do without Weatherby. The guys over at Weatherby, with the new Storix shotgun, we've been putting through the paces, and it's been phenomenal, and super excited to be partnered with them. Again, thank you, Greer. Guys, go check out 50 Ducks, and until next time, we'll see you in the field.